emerged from the trees like a ghost, limping and trembling, her fur drenched in the cold and her eyes filled with panic. In her mouth, she carried a tiny, dying puppy, barely able to breathe. She didn't bark or growl. She simply stood, there in the falling snow, staring at the cabin door as if she knew exactly who was inside and what he had lost. What followed would change everything. Lives were saved, secrets were revealed, and an unbreakable bond formed between a broken man and two forgotten souls. This isn't just a rescue story. It's about how they rescued him. Before we dive in, please like this video if you believe in the healing power of love, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Eli Brennan hadn't answered his phone in weeks, not because it didn't ring, but because there was no one left to answer it for. His old log cabin, tucked deep in the woods of Montana, had become more of a tomb than a home. The silence there wasn't peaceful, it was punishing. Mornings dragged into nights with no voice, no reason to care. That was until the morning she appeared, a shape limping through the snow, no collar, no sound, just pain and something else. Purpose. He first saw her when he cracked open the door to check the weather. At first glance, she appeared to be a shadow pressed against the white. Her, legs trembling, her sides heaving. Then he saw the bundle in her mouth, a puppy, bloodied and barely clinging to life, her eyes locked with his, silently screaming, not out of fear, but out of desperation. Eli didn't move. He couldn't. That stare reached somewhere deep inside. Him, somewhere he had locked away long ago. He wasn't used to making decisions anymore, not the kind that mattered, but something about her. She didn't beg. She didn't whimper. She simply stood there, holding her child as if placing her last hope at his feet, as if she had been searching for him all along. Eli stepped forward without thinking. His hands moved instinctively, the old paramedic inside him stirring beneath the grief. He gently took the puppy into his arms, warm but fading. She let go without a fight, as if trusting him without words. That trust cracked something open inside Eli, a part of him he thought was long gone. The shepherd didn't try to come in. She sat at the threshold, snow accumulating on her fur, her eyes fixed on the door, as though standing guard. So, Eli did something he hadn't done in a long time. He let her in, both of them, for reasons he couldn't explain yet but felt deep in his bones. Inside the cabin, dimly lit by a fireplace that hadn't seen a full flame in days, Eli cleared space on the kitchen table and gently laid the puppy down. The little body was still. Every breath was a question, every second a countdown. Eli's fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from the memory of another table, another time, when he tried to save someone else, someone he couldn't bring. Back the German shepherd, soaked and shaking, watched his every move. She didn't bark, didn't whine. She just stared, ears alert, muscles coiled. It wasn't aggression, it was hope, barely hanging on. A mother refusing to give up. And for the first time in years, Eli realized he didn't want to give up either. Outside, the snow thickened, the forest swallowed the sound. But inside that little cabin, something flickered. A fragile thread between man and beast, not tied by chance but by something deeper, grief, instinct, maybe even fate. As the fire behind them cast light across the wooden walls, Eli whispered without thinking, "I've got you now." Whether he was talking to the puppy or himself, he didn't know. Stick around, because what happens next will pull you even deeper into this unexpected rescue where every heartbeat counts, and the bond between a broken man and two forgotten souls might just rebuild a life thought long lost. The second Eli laid that tiny puppy on the kitchen table, time warped. The snowstorm outside roared louder, as if the universe knew this wasn't going to be just another quiet evening in the middle of nowhere. The cabin, once a haven of stillness, became a battlefield of life and death. Eli grabbed a faded first aid kit from beneath the sink, his hands instinctively reaching for the supplies he hadn't touched in years. Gauze, antiseptic, tweezers. He hadn't patched anyone up since leaving the field, but now that old rhythm, buried beneath layers of grief, started to pulse back through his fingertips. The puppy's breathing was shallow, labored, spaced too far apart. Its body was ice cold, shivering uncontrollably despite the growing fire nearby. Eli wrapped the fragile creature in a thick towel, gently massaging warmth into its chest, whispering soft, nonsensical things like, "Stay with me, kid, and not on my watch." The mother, still soaked from the snow, never took her eyes off him. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. She just stared, unwavering, as if every ounce of her own heartbeat now lived in her pup. Then, as if on cue, the cabin's lights flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Eli cursed under his breath. He hadn't used the generator in weeks, and the snowstorm outside had already smothered the backup fuel lines. The fire was now their only source of heat, light, and hope. He brought the pup closer to the hearth, the glow painting them both in hues of orange and desperation. The silence in the room was louder than the wind outside, and that's when it hit him. This moment, the pulse of fear, the attempt to keep something alive against all odds, it wasn't new. He'd been here before. Not this exact scene, but one that had permanently carved itself into his chest. A snowy road, an overturned car, screams and the smell of gasoline. His daughter's tiny hand slipping from his. The siren screaming too late. That was the day Eli stopped being a hero. That was the day he decided no one would rely on him again. But tonight, something was different. He wasn't trying to save the world. Just one little heartbeat, just one soul with too much left to feel. He glanced at the mother again. Her eyes were tired but steady, as if saying, "I've done all I can. It's your turn now." He melted snow in a pot over the fire to create a warm compress and gently pressed it to the pup's chest, encouraging circulation. Each breath the puppy took was a cliffhanger, a question mark. Eli stayed up the entire night, fighting off his own fatigue like a soldier against sleep. Every few minutes, the pup would twitch, cough, or moan. Each sound was a small victory. Each silence, a fresh wave of dread. But the most haunting thing of all wasn't the puppy's condition. It was the way the mother never once moved away. She stood sentinel over her baby like a ghost soldier who wouldn't retreat, not even in death. Eli saw something in her. A love so absolute it made his own pain feel manageable. Not gone, but maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. As dawn threatened the horizon, the fire crackled like a heartbeat beside them. The puppy stirred again, this time with a faint whimper, barely audible, but alive. Eli let out a shaky breath and whispered, "Good job, kid." And maybe, just maybe, he was talking to himself too. Don't go anywhere, because what Eli is about to discover next will pull you even deeper into this mystery, a discovery buried in snow, silence, and something far more dangerous than he ever expected. By mid-morning, the storm had softened, but the chill still crept through every crack in the cabin. Eli hadn't slept. He sat hunched near the fireplace, eyes fixed on the small bundle curled in a blanket. Scout, he had started calling him, still weak, but the worst seemed to be behind them for now. The mother slept by the door, one eye, always open, half guard, half prayer. Eli stared at her. "Luna," he muttered aloud. She flicked her ear in response. Something about the way she tilted her head made it seem like she understood, not just the word, but the act of being named, of being seen. But even with the quiet settling in, Eli couldn't shake the unease gnawing at the edge of his mind. Luna kept glancing out the frosted window, always toward the trees. not randomly. She wasn't anxious. She was watching, expecting, as if whatever she had escaped from wasn't finished yet. So Eli bundled himself in layers, grabbed his old boots, and followed her gaze into the forest. The snow reached up to his shins, crunching with every step. The silence was thick, more like held breath than peace. Trees stood like centuries-old sentinels, shadows stretching long behind trunks. Just 20 yards from the cabin, he saw them. Tracks. Not just dog tracks, but human ones too. At first scattered, then panicked, then bloody, his breath caught in his throat. He followed the prints until they disappeared into a shallow dip near an old frozen creek. There, half buried under snow, was the remnant of a campsite, torn tarp, crushed cans. Something worse, a strip of cloth soaked in dried blood, twisted around a piece of nylon rope. Nearby, a metal tag lay half-frozen in the ice. He knelt to pick it up and turned it over. 3 initials were etched into the metal, JKC. The letters meant nothing to him, not yet, but they made his gut twist. Eli scanned the tree line, suddenly aware of how exposed he was. The feeling, the one he hadn't felt since his paramedic days, gripped him like frostbite. He didn't run, but he moved faster on the way back. Each step heavier, each glance behind him more frequent. When he got back to the cabin, Luna was waiting. She paced near the door, tail stiff, posture alert. Scout let out a soft cry, a feeble bark that barely rose above a whisper. Eli closed the door behind him, locked it, and leaned against it for a long breath. That night, Luna pressed her body against Eli's leg for the first time. Quiet, thank you. Or maybe just a silent plea not to go back out there. Eli didn't speak. He just reached down and let his hand rest on her head. It was the first time he'd touched another living soul in months. Maybe longer. The fire crackled again, and as it did, Eli turned the tag over and over in his fingers, whispering to himself, "Where did you come from, Luna?" But he already knew. They hadn't just wandered here, they had escaped something still out there. And next, Eli is going to find out just how far someone will go to keep a secret buried in the snow. Stick around. The truth is colder than the forest itself. The wind returned like it had a score to settle. By the following night, the storm that had seemed to pass circled back with a vengeance, the kind of Montana snowstorm that swallowed sound, smothered light, and made the trees creak like old bones. Eli stood at the window, the glass fogged from the fire behind him, watching the flakes thicken like falling ash. It was strange how something so silent could carry so much weight. But tonight wasn't just about weather. It was about memory. Inside, Scout whimpered softly in his blanket nest. Luna was curled, tightly beside him, ears flicking at every crack in the walls. The cabin, though small, felt massive in the dark. Every shadow looked taller, every creak louder. But it was the silence that finally cracked Eli. Not outside, but within. Storms always pulled at the past, and this one had long fingers. He hadn't told anyone, not even himself, that this time of year was the worst. Not because of the holidays or the isolation, but because this was when they died. His wife Miriam, his daughter Ellie, one slip of black ice, one truck coming too fast, one too many seconds. He'd been driving, screaming, and still he couldn't stop it, couldn't fix it. He remembered the twisted wreckage like it was still in front of him, metal folded like paper, steam rising from the engine, the smell of burned rubber and blood. And Ellie, her little hand reaching for him as the world went dark. That night broke him, not just emotionally, but spiritually. For years he'd wandered, the ruins of that moment, looking for someone to blame, always circling back to the same mirror. That's why he came out here, to disappear without dying, to bury himself before the earth had to. But now there was Luna, there was Scout, and in their breathing, fragile as it was, he'd found something unexpected, a reason to care, a reason to stay awake. He moved to the fire, tossing in another log, flames rising in response. The power had long since gone out, and the generator's frozen fuel line wouldn't restart until morning. He checked on Scout, placing a gentle hand on the pup's ribs, still warm, still breathing. Luna shifted, closer, resting her chin on Eli's knee. He didn't move, just let her stay there. The contact was electric, grounding, like maybe they were keeping each other from falling apart. Then came the noise, a scratch, then two, at the window. Not the wind, not a tree, something deliberate, something trying to get in. Eli stood slowly. Luna rose too, ears perked, body stiff. He grabbed the flashlight from the counter, heart pounding like a war drum. He inched toward the window, but when the beam hit the glass, there was nothing. No figure, no eyes. Just prints. Paws and boot treads mixed together, smeared in the snow like a bad memory trying to rewrite itself. The storm howled louder now, as if mocking him. But Eli didn't flinch. Not this time. He locked the windows, shut the curtains, and sat back down between the dog and the pup. Firelight flickered across his face as he whispered, "Not tonight. Because here's the truth. Some storms are outside. But the worst ones live inside us. And when a man chooses to face them, not just survive them, that's when healing begins. But this storm was far from over. Something, or someone, was still out there. And in the next chapter, Eli is going to find out exactly what Luna was running from and why it may be coming back for them all. Stay with us. Things are about to get even colder. Morning broke with a quiet tension, the kind that settles over everything like a warning disguised as peace. The snow had eased, but the chill hung heavier than before. Eli sat beside Scout, the puppy still, sleeping but not as limp as yesterday. There was color back in his gums, a twitch in his tiny paws, a little strength in his breath. Progress. But healing, Eli knew too well, doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it's just the eye of the storm. As Eli leaned in to check the pup's temperature again, something caught his eye beneath the fur on Scout's side, just under the ribs. A patch of skin looked darker and irregular. He parted the fur gently and felt his pulse spike. It wasn't just a bruise. It was a burn mark, circular, sharp-edged, like it had been branded. His stomach turned. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this. Someone had owned this puppy. The idea hit him like ice water. Scout and Luna hadn't just wandered through the woods and knocked on the first warm door they found. They were running from something, from someone. He stood and went straight to the small storage cabinet in the corner, pulling out his old satellite receiver, his only real connection to the outside world, especially when the landlines were down. He booted up the dusty laptop he kept mostly for emergencies. Fingers flew across the keys as muscle memory took over. He searched for anything connected to animal abuse, illegal breeding operations, or dog branding cases. After an hour, something clicked. There had been a case out of Idaho last year, a breeding operation raided and shut down after anonymous tips led authorities to a cabin in the mountains. The images were disturbing. Kennels stacked like shipping crates, pups locked in wire cages, some missing limbs or eyes. The photos haunted Eli. But what caught his breath wasn't the story. It was the tag in one of the police photos, barely visible on the collar of a rescued dog. The same initials, JKC. Eli reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the frozen tag he'd found in the woods. The same. It had to be. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. This wasn't coincidence. Luna wasn't just a lost stray. She had escaped hell. And somehow she had enough instinct to find the one man in the middle of nowhere who knew how to fight for a life again. Suddenly the radio crackled from across the room. It wasn't on. Eli moved to it and flipped the switch. A faint emergency. Frequency played. Local ranger chatter. Suspicious vehicle seen near the northern forest line. Black van, no plates, headed south, possibly transporting animals. Eli's blood ran cold. They were looking for her. And maybe they weren't just passing through. Maybe they knew. Maybe they were coming back. He glanced at Luna. She was staring. At the door again. It was then he made a decision. No more hiding, no more retreat. Not for them, not again. He rummaged through the closet, dragging out old planks, nails, anything he could use to barricade the windows and fortify the shed. Every movement was quick and precise, brimming with a fire Eli hadn't felt in years. Not since he lost his family, not since he gave up on saving anyone, but now he had someone to protect. Two, in fact, as the sun dipped low again, casting eerie light over the snowdrifts outside. Eli stood in the center of the cabin, hammer in hand, chest tight and heart awake for the first time in years. Because now he knew this wasn't just a rescue, it was a fight. And in the next part, you'll see what happens when danger knocks and someone answers, not with fear, but with fire. Stick around. The real storm is just beginning. The wind had settled into that eerie stillness again. The kind that makes your skin crawl, not because of the cold, but because of what you can't hear. The snowflakes floated in slow motion, delicate and deceiving, as if the storm had paused just to let something darker pass through. Eli sat in the kitchen, his tools spread out from reinforcing the cabin. Windows braced, doors double-locked, every creak checked twice. Luna hadn't moved from her post beside the front door all afternoon. Scout, though still weak, had begun shifting more often, sometimes letting out a soft bark that barely echoed past his own ears. Eli had just started to lower his guard when it happened. A knock. Not loud, not aggressive, just a single calm tap. Tap, tap, like someone testing the wood. His body tensed instantly. Luna stood up. Her ears twitched and a low growl vibrated from her throat, not playful, but from bone-deep memory. Eli moved toward the door slowly. He didn't open it or speak. He peered through the peephole he'd drilled himself years ago for no real reason. Until now. Outside stood a man, maybe in his mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a heavy green coat with a badge stitched onto the chest. Wildlife control official. Polished, but wrong. Something about him felt manufactured, like a suit in a movie, not someone meant for these woods. "Evening, sir," the man called out casually. His voice was too smooth for someone trekking through a storm. "Sorry to bother you. We got reports of a lost animal. Thought she might have passed through here. German shepherd, adult female, has a pup. You seen anything?" Every word out of the man's mouth made Eli's stomach churn. The way he said animal, like it was disposable. The way his eyes darted toward the windows, as if mapping the place. But most of all, the fact that he knew exactly what to. As for down to the breed and pup, that wasn't random. That was specific. That was intentional. Eli stepped back, speaking through the door. "No animals here. Just me." Pause. "You mind if I take a quick look around?" "I do, actually." Another. Pause, longer this time.